Cloud. Dr. Chatterjee also asked me to do some screenshots. So I guess give me your best smile, right? And I'm going to do a couple of screenshots here. I'm scrolling through. Okay, that's great. Now let me go back to the share screen so I can show you guys the presentation that I had prepared as I speak. Okay. Okay, so you know what we're all here for, right? To walk you through the process and give you the opportunity to hopefully be able to be accepted to a student conference opportunity. And so I wanted to bring this together to sort of review some of the stuff that we talked about in the last session. But I think, is it true? Am I getting this right? All of you did attend the last session, is that right? The one last semester? So I think I
I
could
did not.
probably, yeah, everyone went through that. So I could probably skip some of the reviews from the last session, but just to remind us all a couple of things about the task that we're about to embark on. What is this research conference and sort of why do it, right? So some of you have probably already presented at research conferences, or you've sat in on some. A research conference is basically an event lasting anything from one day to several days, usually bracketing a weekend, in which researchers, not necessarily academics, right? So private researchers, research at institutions, students, as well as professors, might come together and present and discuss their work. So why should you present at a research conference? Some of you who have been thinking about doing this, who had people suggest that you consider doing it, what were the reasons that came into your mind when you thought about the opportunity to share your work with others? Go ahead and just unmute yourself and share your thoughts.
I would expect feedback, that I would go there, I would tell what I found or written, and then people would say, hey, that's not bad, or maybe that's good. So I would have that feedback that I'm doing right thing, or they would say, no, this is like old fashioned or like bad topic or whatever. And I would say, okay, so I will switch for next, like for something else.
Sounds good, Jan. So looking for opportunities to improve, to get feedback. Anyone else?
I just want experience.
Experience to see what it's all about, right? Yeah.
I agree with both Jan and Michaela in both of those things. I also think it's just a step in the process of becoming a more polished historian.
Okay, right. So practicing history making by showing the history that you are making in your research. What about in like really just kind of cold, hard, practical terms? What might it do for a possible future employer or for a PhD program to see that you've gone to a conference, you've had your research presented, right? So part of it is resume building. And along with that, it assumes all of the experience you've gained, the networking, the professionalization, right? How to be a historian, but also how to be a researcher, right? How to be able to speak critically about your work and address a wide audience, whether it's the specialists, like the worst research I do, 10 people in the entire world understand what I'm talking about. So can I talk to these 10 people just as well as I can talk to a wide generalist audience of intelligent people who don't know exactly what I'm doing, but could follow along with the argument, right? So it's professionalization on lots of different levels. Of course, it's receiving feedback, nudges, ideas, suggestions about your research. And don't forget, this conference opportunities often go hand in hand with publication opportunities. So at a lot of the professional conferences, publishers will go to them and they will actively hunt out. They'll sit in on the talks. And, I've had people come approach me to say, would you like to publish with us? We have a series about, XYZ, and we think yours would fit in really well. And some conferences also publish the presenter's material in proceedings. So this would be like a book publication that has anything from your abstract to your full conference paper available. So it would be a way to sort of circulate your findings. So in addition to all this, it's a great way to be a historian beyond publishing in academic or scientific journals, right? This is really the place to exchange information between experts. So something, and I know Mary wasn't at the last meeting because she was busy writing her 5940 paper. So just to remind us of a couple things, and I think I wrote this on the flyer, the ways that I would like you guys to get into this is to basically not work from ground zero, but work with something that you already have, right? Ideally, take a class assignment, something that you felt good about, and develop that with the time that you have before a call for papers. So look, go back and reread your research project, check in with the professor who taught that class, ask about any manageable, feasible improvements that are reasonable within the month to a couple of months before that event, and start making those edits. What we're going to do today is we're going to actually talk about two conferences with upcoming calls for papers. And we're going to talk about the ways in which you can prepare for that, particularly in writing the abstract. So I was originally only going to talk about the first one, which is the RISCA RSCA, the RISCA Research, Scholarship, and Creative Activity event, and they do this annually. You see the deadline of when it takes place in mid-March. The deadline, we've got basically 2 weeks coming up. I was originally only going to talk about that, and then just this afternoon, right, just preparing for this, I realized that they had updated information about significations, and so they've got a very fast call for applications, which is just 1 week for today. So you guys might want to, right after this, like get your stuff ready and send it off. But before we go in a little bit more, let's just spend 1 minute thinking about what these two events are, how they're different, how they're similar. What can you tell just by glancing at the titles of each event? And here I'm going to ask Fernando if you could provide the URL link into the chat for everyone to include if you guys want to look it up. Fernando's also going to attach, I don't know how, but Fernando, I'm assuming you know how to do this, attach the document that I sent you with the call for papers for significations. So you guys can access that and read it more on your own. But for now, just as a group, tell me what you can see just from looking at the titles of each event. Is there anything specific that would be helpful for you to know as an applicant for these events? Anything you want to use to sort of kind of sell your project to show people that you would be, your paper would fit really well with this conference?
The first one seems to be general, that like whoever can apply, different majors. The second one looks like more specific because there is some like title, like narrative webs. So I would suppose that it should be somehow like connected maybe to that.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect, right? So we see that Significations has a defined theme, right? It's a thematic conference. And so they're really looking for works that can somehow, have an anchor in their thematic concept. And then RISCA, right? It's open to anybody, but it's really open to students, and it's really open to students who are doing something original, whether it's original research, original scholarship that they're publishing, or maybe co-authoring with somebody, or something creative, right? But it's still original, right? So that's kind of I guess that's the theme for RISCA, right? What is original student work? Okay, that's perfect. So let's use this then to kind of think about the things that we would need to do to start moving on. To start moving on to be able to make the application. So I'm going to focus most of what I say here on RISCA and then kind of insert significations where it's relevant. But more or less, applications for all conferences are more or less the same in terms of what they require. So let's look particularly at what RISCA requires before we sort of zoom out to talk about generally what conferences require. Okay, so you see here the application page, it's online. And what they want is an advisor signature sheet. That's something easy to do. Take care of it now, send it to your advisor. There's an application form itself that's basically requesting information about yourself. Sort of biographical, the title of your project, things like that. They need the abstract, and that's what we're going to spend today talking about. And they also have, like most conference application processes, they have very specific formatting requirements. So I would admonish all of you to read it several times, whatever the formatting requirements are for each of these applications, and just make sure you're very clear on what they are, and create separate files when you're putting together your application processes, applications. Okay, let's see. So we've kind of got that. They've also got here some sample abstracts if you guys want to come back later and look at it. They don't have a history example, but I think it's the final abstract in their sample abstracts file. That's something that would fit in the category that probably most of you would be applying to, which is arts and humanities. Okay. All right. So what is an abstract, right? Generally, what is it that conferences are looking for when they call for abstracts? And then specifically, what does RISCA require? So the difference between the abstract and the actual presentation is that the abstract is a summary of your work, right? It's something that you submit in order to let the conference organizers know what your research is, what your contribution is, what your argument is, and that's how they decide whether or not to include you in this professional event. Now, for RISCA specifically, the presentation itself is something, and we're going to have another workshop about preparing for presentations. We'll have one later this semester, but they have two forms of presentations. I assume most of you will probably apply for an oral presentation. This is very common in our discipline as historians. We usually give sort of these mini lectures, right, a short lecture in the form of a paper. But the other option that RISCA offers is a poster session. And this is something that is more common in the sciences, to give poster sessions. Poster sessions would also require you to, there's an oral component to it, but it's really you speaking before a poster session. And you don't have quite the same amount of time to speak as you would in an oral presentation. Ideally, right, in the best of all worlds, you write your abstract well before, ideally you write your abstract after you've written your paper, right? That's why I'm suggesting that you work with a class assignment that you've already completed. In some cases though, some conferences are set so far in advance before the deadline for their applications that in many cases you end up proposing what you think you would write about, proposing what are likely your conclusions, right? And this, of course, entails you having already done a little bit of legwork on this project, on this research, before applying for that. So, you know, our flagship conference as historians is the American Historical Association, and their deadlines are usually 1 year before the event itself. So you can see how abstracts are really just proposals of what you intend to speak about. Okay, so what goes into an abstract? Conference organizers usually will specify the length. It's usually not more than 500 words. So you might recall I put up there for significations. Significations has something like 250 to 500 word limit for an abstract. And so you might think of that as as 2 pages double spaced of a paper. In the case of RISCA, they want something that's 200 pages in one paragraph. So they just sort of want everything right boiled into this one paragraph. RISCA encourages you that your abstract be directed to generalists. So just like the title kind of indicates, right? This is sort of an event for everybody to learn from each other. Because the conference review committee will usually read the abstract and not your actual paper, right? That's something that would be really reserved for the event itself, the conference itself. The abstract you submit should be really an independent document that's aimed at that specific committee and that connects solidly your work with the conference itself. So here, thinking in the case of significations, it has a theme for its conference. So read very carefully what the conference theme is and think as you're writing your abstract, how you can sort of direct and show that your work is very perfect for that particular event. A couple of tips here. You might want to kind of glean some words, maybe from the event title or the call for papers into your abstract to show this connection. The call for papers should specify the length of the abstract, any special formatting requirements, and whether the abstract is going to be published in a conference bulletin or proceedings. That's typically not the case with RISCA, but that is certainly the case with significations, right? They will be publishing the abstract. So think about writing it sort of for posterity, right? People are going to be referring to this later to remember what was it that Jerry was talking about at that conference, for example. And these details really matter because the abstracts that don't meet the format, and here I'm talking about, you know, all the double spacing and then the font number, font sizes, margin sizes, all that stuff. If it doesn't meet those requirements, that's usually a reason to reject the paper early on or the abstract. So make sure that you really read very carefully what it is that they want. I'm also reminded to let you all know that Significations is an event for graduate students hosted by the English department. But in the past, they have had upper division undergraduate students present. And they're really interested in interdisciplinary and intersectional work. And history students have always participated in Significations. So do seriously consider turning an application in for that. One last question that I often get, which is, can you change your project when you actually present it at the conference from what you described in the abstract? And the answer is kind of a soft yes, but really within reason. Think of the abstract really as a promise, right? You are promising to deliver such and such project that the abstract describes. The conference organizers are going to hold you to your word, right? Because they're using that abstract to create panels or sessions that might fit together. A panel or session would be, say, 3 to 4 or 5 papers about a very specific theme within that theme, right? So maybe this is a regional focus. Maybe this is, you know, everything happening within the 16th century versus another panel that's 20th century, right? It's kind of a way of organizing the various participants' work. Your abstract promises research on, you know, the French scientific expeditions into the Amazon in the 18th century, right? So that's what you say you'll deliver. And you show up and you talk about African women in mining towns in Bolivia, right? So if that's the case, your paper is going to look a little bit silly in this 18th century Amazonian panel, and the organizers may not ask you to come back. So again, within reason, there's some flexibility, but try not to veer too far off from what you've committed to. If the conference presentation, you know, or I have to add one more thing. It's entirely possible. It's very natural in the research process for your, you know, what you end up producing to kind of have some surprise, unexpected divergences. And I think that's entirely possible as long as it's not too far away from what it is that you're proposing. Okay, I think I've said enough. I think you kind of get my point about that. So let's move on to actually talking about the conference abstract itself. because RSCA abstracts are limited to 200 words, they have to really be pared down to the essentials. You've got more or less the same requirement of the significations abstract, even though they've given you sort of a wider word limit. Typically, oops, sorry about that. Typically, most abstracts will ask you, or most abstracts expect you to address these 4 questions. And it's all basically about what your research is, why you chose to do it, how you're going to do it, what you find, what you did find, what you hope to find. If the research is completed, share what your findings mean. If it's not done, but of course you've done a little bit of legwork on it, you should have some notion to kind of provide an idea of the implications of your findings. So I would suggest that we could practically do this, answer these 4 questions really in 7 steps. And I provided the first step up here. So bring the reader in, right? We all know about the great hook in historical essays that we read to kind of draw the reader, to fascinate the reader. Have a title that is informative, that is focused, indicating what your problem is, and somehow giving a sense of your general approach. You might bring in a catchy phrase and then provide a colon, right? So the catchy phrase would be your title. And then after the colon would be the subtitle, which gives you an explanation of that title. So, you know, while a snappy title is great in terms of calling attention to your project, which you want, it's really what comes afterwards, right? It's really that subtitle that kind of gives the substance, the scope of what it is that you're doing. Historians, don't forget, this example is something probably from literature, right? So historians, don't forget to include dates or date ranges. You might think about other things like the who, the where of your project. Those are places, those are things that would be good for fitting into the subtitle. Okay, so look at this title that we have before us. What do you immediately know about the research project based on the title?
It's gonna talk about gender issues probably in pop culture or like films and movies, like Disney,
Okay.
since Disney is like that main corporation now.
Okay. Do you know the specific source, the base of the evidence that this paper is going to be really focused on?
Yes, Little Mermaid.
Yeah, right. You know, it's a Disney production, right? So you have an idea sort of of this wide mass appeal, right? So already within this title, we have a good sense of what this is. It's got kind of, you know, packed with Satan, kind of this catchy title, right? But then everything else, kind of the meat of the title comes in after the colon. Okay, so, you know, you've hooked the reader. Now, what do you do once you hook the reader? Well, draw them in even more. Provide a clear and smart research question or pose the problem in a way that lets them see, oh, wow, this is, you know, this is what I'm going to be learning about. It goes without saying that the whole abstract should be clear, right? Now, bring this clarity further along with you as you move beyond the title, the subtitle, by providing your research question, your problem. Develop the title, tell them a little bit more to move them deeper into the abstract, which is essentially moving them into the heart of your research, your arguments, the context, the meat, right, of your research. So look at these 2 examples here. Why should you maybe not use that first example as a way to further draw the reader in? And why should we use the second one? So I guess I'm really asking 2 questions. How do we make that cat up there say, oh, I'm really curious?
Well, the first one doesn't really say anything about what they're going to do. They're just talking about what others have done.
Yeah, the first one draws attention on everyone but who we're going to be hearing from, right? What else?
The second one,
No.
I'm sorry, the second one
No, no.
kind of takes a position.
It takes a position, right? It gives you a sort of an interpretation for understanding the Little Mermaid's pact with Satan. Okay, good. What else?
Like it kind of establishes the problem. Like they can either this, that, or that. So there's 3 different subfields that you're going to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, they even give it to us. There's a dilemma, right? There's a problem. If you're
Yeah.
scanning for keywords to know what to read for, it's got it right there. The blue writing on there identifies other keywords. What do you think they're talking about? What are the extra points for using keywords from the call for papers?
Well, the silent and the invisible were terms used in the call, basically.
Yeah, yeah. So they're, they read very carefully the call for papers, kind of, putting everything in. What's another reason why somebody may have put blah for that first sentence up there?
It doesn't like provide the historiography. Like
It kind of hints, actually, it kind of hints a little bit at the specialized literature, right? Because critics have done it. But I'm looking at the word passive or passivity. I find this all very passive. What do I find passive about it?
It doesn't really like take the argument of what they're trying to argue.
Right, there's no argument there.
It's not active voice, it's passive voice.
Yes,
As
any of you
written.
who have me will know that this is one of my pet peeves. It's passive voice. Critics have written about. Critics don't write, they have written about, right? Okay, so there's that. Actually, sorry, my bad. That is active voice, but it's written away. It's got past tense. But there's one more passive element to it, and that is critics. I mean, that's kind of helpful because we see one position in the scholarship, but I find it too passive in that you don't just come up and tell me, who are you, who are you challenging, right? Who are you saying is either right or wrong in taking this position, right? So there's a passivity that I see in something like this, but that's just my own personal peeve. Okay, so let's move on then. Stake, number 3, stake your claim. Oops. There we go, stake your claim. So what do I mean about this? If you began with a problem, then you provide an answer, or you try to at least endeavor to address that, right? Pose your thesis. Don't cut and paste your paper thesis in and plunk it in there, but write it in to fit within the flow of this. Pose your argument, your solution. In this case, I think using personal pronouns, using I, works really well. Because well, let me ask you guys, why would you use I for the argument sentences, for the position sentences?
Because you're taking a position. This is the whole point of your paper. So this is what I'm arguing. This isn't what someone else is arguing. This is what I am arguing.
It also breaks up the language, right? If everything else is kind of in this third person impersonal, the scholarship does this, and then, XYZ scholar by this last name does these things, you throwing an I rhetorically breaks it up and calls attention, that distinguishes what you do, what everyone else does. And again, everything should be all in service of your position, your argument. What are some things that work in this example that you see here? Anything work?
I think it makes you sympathetic with the position you're going to take. It's sacrificing her emotions in order to achieve her goals. They're kind of like noble things to, aspire to.
It's already setting you up for your sympathy, for you to root for the thesis, right? It's already winning over, trying to convince you. Couple of other things. It's very clear, right? It identifies it introduces and identifies the characters, not expecting you to know who these people are. I think most of us have probably seen this, so it's a point of reference we have. But if not, right, the reader would actually know what it is. So it's very simple. It's very clear. I won't spend any more time on that. And then the next point is bring in your method, right? How do you make your argument? It helps in some cases to name theories or methodological schools, because that would tell people how you're approaching your problem or how you're going to try to reach your solution, your position. It situates you within an ongoing debate, so it places you within the historiography. And then remember also that not all conference organizers and readers are going to be experts in your field. They're certainly not all historians. So help situate them with your ideas in the larger conversations in the field. For example, I don't know diddly squat about British literature in the 19th century, for example, but I know what post-colonial theory is, right, as a historian. So at least if I get some of these things, I have a clear sense of what it is that, what's the approach, how they're showing this. And that might help me determine if this is going to be a good fit for the conference. So we have some examples here, right, of them naming particular lines of school in the broader literature that they're working with. They highlight something original that this author takes credit for when she writes, I argue, right, blah, 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 something that kind of diverges from the standard position in scholarship. So there are already a lot of noteworthy points that call attention to what is original from here. And through this, again and again, what is this author continually doing to convince the reader that I really have to present at your conference? She's using keywords taken from the call for papers, right? To let us know, okay, this is going to be the perfect fit, right? Notice also it's very meaty, right? So this all requires a lot of writing, thinking, revising, etc. And then finally, or maybe not finally, but the next step 5, is basically state your conclusion, right? There's really no consensus about whether or not or how much jargon to be using in an abstract. But I would say for a conference like RISCA, end up, aim for writing for generalists, avoid jargon unless it's necessary. And even when you do use it, make sure you explain it briefly. Don't put in technical terms just to show off. And remember the things that the mouse reminds us, right? The abstracts don't have notes and they don't have bibliographies. Number 6, be thorough, be a good team player. Conclude the abstract with a sentence about your presentation format. Let the organizers know that you've spent some time really deliberating on what the requirements are. Tell the organizers if there's technology that you need for the paper. I have read many abstracts that end with something like, I have written my paper and I can present it in 20 minutes. I will bring video clips on a portable drive and will need a computer, projector, and internet access to show all my materials, right? Bam, very specific, very clear what it is, what they promise, what they will deliver. And then stick with the time limits. I will kind of share some tips for managing that when we talk later for preparing for conference presentations. And then number 7, the thing that you all know is so important, right? Be professional, step up to it. Make sure you check and double check all these things, these 4 things. Make sure your abstract meets the length requirements and all the specific formatting. Make sure that it's written clear, it's well edited. There's nothing more distracting than running into typos and grammar issues in a really beautifully devised project. These repeated issues are just downright annoying. So take care of all that. Fill out everything that's required. In some cases, when you guys start moving away from school conferences and into sort of professional associations, they would require membership, signatures, things like that. So, you know, make sure you've sort of complied with all that. And then make sure it's complete, follow instructions, and submit it in on time. So those are the 7 steps. And you guys could begin this all immediately right now for the next 2 conferences coming up. I also wanted to let you know of some more later about which we have news. So for those of you who attended last semester's workshop, I provided a much larger list. I think I had like 6 or 7 different student conferences from previous years that annually hold them. I haven't had any updates about those other ones, but in addition to these 2 that we're talking about today, there are 2 more with some upcoming deadlines. So you guys can note it there. You can email me if you weren't present at the last conference, and I can send you my list for that. But sort of keep a heads up for things happening later this semester and then later this year. And also, if any of you know about any conference opportunities, please send it and let me know so that I can let everybody else that's interested be able to participate in such an event. So there we have it. Do we have any questions or comments that anyone would like to share?
I would like to ask, but it's unrelated what you have said. I already read the instructions and requirements for that that one at Castell, which is on 12th of March. And when they are, I think they ask for maximum of 20 or 25 pages of paper. And I think there is something like all notes or like attachments or whatever should be in the appendix at the end. So does it mean that even in my paper, when I use notes like on every page, I will like a footnotes, I will all put them at the end as the end notes, and that means that they will save like the space in my paper?
I think you're talking about RISCA, the one on the 12th.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one on the 12th. So I'm not quite sure what you mean, but I think if they ask for all your notes to go at the end, I think they would like the footnotes to be converted to endnotes.
Okay.
So it would come at the end of the essay and it would come before the bibliography.
Yeah, because they are saying the notes should go in appendix, but it's not appendix. But it means that I will put them as end notes, and they will not be counted in the like page length.
Yeah. Oh, I see. I guess that's trying to give you maximum space to write your argument. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was the only point that I was like unsure.
Great. Any other questions? How many of you are applying to RISCA? Yay, Fernando. Yay, Jan. Yay, Christian. Oh, come on, Jerry. Didn't you say you had something ready to go? What type of ready to go is not applying? Just give it to them. It's ready.
There's a whole nother year to do it.
But why wait? Why not do it now?
Because I have your class.
I will say that
presentation for you on Monday.
Well, see, once you're done with that, then you can move on to this. Get that out of the way. Move on to bigger things. I will say that history has traditionally done very well at RISCA. Last year, I coached somebody in Latin American studies, and she went all the way to state and ended up getting second place in state. Several years we've had top award winners for the local Cal State RISCA. So throw your lot in, folks. You're coming from a very, trailblazing history of a lot of great conference presentations. So throw in. I'm really happy to see that some of you are submitting. I would love to lean in on Michaela, Jerry, and Mary and Maria to get you guys to apply to at least one of these. And if you've already written the abstract to one, just send it to the other one. That's it. So I'll leave with you with those thoughts to think of. If there are no other questions at all, anyone, then I guess I'll say it was great to see you all. Thank you. Have a great night. I hope you had a great first week of the semester. And here's to more positive things happening the rest of the semester. I'll keep you guys updated if we have another workshop. And my intention is that the next workshop be one that actually walks you through putting together your conference presentation. Later, if there's enough interest, we might actually have some kind of mock presentations where people can critique each other and practice speaking in front of a group. Okay, folks, have a great night.
Nice to see everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
I just have one quick question.
Michaela, tell me.
Because I know when you had the flyer, you said to try to choose a piece of work that you already written and work with a professor. So the one I was thinking about choosing was one with Dr. Suarez, and I've been trying to email her and get in contact so I know like what to improve on. Should this be good? Which one would be best for which conference? But she's not answering, so I don't know. Like I would like to do a conference, but it's kind of destroying my confidence of should I just wait a year? Because I don't know if I can really, I would like to think about it with a professor that I work with instead of just submitting like an abstract like within a week.
So a couple things. One, I know that Dr. Suarez has a massive deadline breathing down her neck on Monday. So that might be why,
okay.
I mean, it's okay, like definitely send her stuff, but that might be why she hasn't exactly gotten back immediately. And two, don't wait until next year because you can apply again next year because your research will be different next year, right? You working with the exact same documents today is going to make a different final research paper than the research paper you write a year from now. So do both. That's what I'm trying to say. And doing both is going to make your second one even better because you'll have so much more experience. You won't be so nervous, et cetera, right? All these things. And then third, am I understanding that these are two different research projects that you did with Dr. Suarez?
No, just one. It was for a final. It was about reconstruction, and because I like about the education field, I kind of wrote an analysis about how the California curriculum needs to update their unit on reconstruction because I just think it's terrible. So that was like what that paper was on.
And what was it that you wanted about instruction or suggestions for?
Because I don't know if it's more